Hi everyone, my name is Lily. I'm a social worker and I work in child protective services, also known as Child Welfare Services or Department of Children and Family Services (DCSF). And this is part two of my video about Tyler James Walter. So the situation with Tyler, he was under 2 years old. I think he was about 22 months. There was a drug raid at the mom's house and she went to jail, so he had to come into foster care. He then went to live with a 19-year-old cousin out of town, about 2 hours away in LA County, and he died 3 months after he went to live with her. This cousin got kicked out of her house, was living in the car with Tyler for about a week. There was another adult staying in the car with them, but they don't say if it was the girlfriend or if it's a new person. He was babysat by somebody else the day he died. Then in the afternoon, the cousin was smoking weed in the car with him in the back seat. Noticed him slumped over and took him out of the car to do CPR and then called the paramedics. He was later pronounced dead at the hospital. So in the first part, I explained, a little bit more. There's a little bit more details, more explanation of how things work and the system. But what I want to concentrate here is on the possible physical abuse and cause of death. So he was found to have died of blunt head trauma. He was in and out of the hospital for vomiting, and he wouldn't eat. He had a linear skull fracture, bruises on both sides of his forehead, discoloration behind the ear, the bruise on the cheek that was mentioned on the other article that we talked about in the other video, and a cut under his chin. Now, sides of the forehead, cheek, I don't know what, behind the ear, chin. Only one behind the ear is not very visible. The rest of them, if you see this child, you should have noticed that. That's why I split this one into a second episode. I don't know how this was not ruled a homicide. It doesn't seem anybody was arrested. I don't know. They don't provide the caregiver, the cousin's name. For this one, for my commentary part, I want to explain how does a fatality investigation. I don't know if this is something that would be done by child welfare or only the law enforcement. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of experiences I've had, but thankfully I've never had a child die in my caseload, so I'm not sure how it would be. When I was a pretty new worker, I had a situation where a child was injured very badly, so the case was reassigned to a senior worker that had more experience than me, but I stayed on to help and to gain that experience. So big disclaimer is the social workers are not medical professionals. We get a 2-day training. I think that's a state mandated training, so it should be the same everywhere, about bruises and identifying, different types of bruises. Well, not types, but like, being able to tell, is this looks like it was done by an instrument. Is it straight? It's probably a belt or something. You wouldn't do that with your hand. Is it a pattern bruise that it looks, again, done with an object? Is it a hand mark? then we're just trying to distinguish, do we have reason to be concerned of it being abused, or does this look like it's a normal childhood injury? And what we would consider a regular childhood injury, and a little bit older kids, are knee scrapes, bruises in the chins, elbows. With little kids, kids under 6 months, any bruise is considered suspicious because they are not running around bouncing. After 6 months they start crawling, so maybe it's more of a little gray area. But again, any child that's nonverbal due to their age, or maybe they have some developmental concerns, we would take a lot more seriously. Regularly, child welfare services records are completely confidential. This article that I read from 10news.com, the one in October 2019 is the one that had the information about the skull fracture and bruises. But the one from February 2020 had the information that they were actually able to get the records. And in this case, the article does state that the social worker noticed the bruise on the cheek and a scrape right next to it, and it was explained as he had an accident. He fell out of the tricycle, or he had trouble with the tricycle the day, something like that. Knowing how bruises work, you don't. He had bruises. Again, sides of the forehead, behind one ear. He had discoloration, so that means some sort of mark. It might have been an already healed bruise. It might have been something else. The doctor wasn't able to say absolutely 100% sure that it is. So that's where it's just a discoloration. Bruise on the cheek and cut under his chin. All, pretty visible. Maybe not the one behind the ear. Bruises don't tend to appear right away. They kind of take a while to get there and they linger. So I think that, the day before they would have been noticeable. There's a possibility that they weren't, but at least that one. But again, bruise on the face. With kids that are nonverbal, we take any sort of bruises or marks to the head, face, ears, neck, torso, wherever the vital organs are. We usually go to a child abuse expert, a doctor that is able to do an examination. When we are not very concerned, like in this situation where I've said, I can kind of see it, maybe like sometimes we do what we call a paper consult. I don't know if this is available everywhere, but at least where I work, we do, where we take pictures, document what they're telling us, maybe ask the child if it hurts or what happened. Little kids, even when they don't talk, they're able to kind of show us, they're able to tell us something. So we kind of put those pieces together and say, type an email or a form, send it to the doctor's office, along with the pictures, so they can tell us, are we concerned about this child? Does he need to be seen in person? Or do we need to do follow-up, or does this look consistent with the injury that they're saying? I've had situations where they're measuring what they're telling me, taking pictures of what they said, that, if he got hit with a tricycle, where's the tricycle? Show me. Let me take a picture. Let me measure it, how high it is. Where does it hit? Where does that hit him in their body? This article that I read from 10news.com explained that the social worker had gone to the home and seen the bruise, but it didn't have any more on what was done about it. So it makes me think that there wasn't. Right? Because if you're talking about this child had an injury that they said, but somehow he died the day later, I would think if you made 30 steps to clarify what happened, that would have been taken into consideration in the article. So when we have an open case and a child is hurt, the same day I find out, I have to go see it in person. Sometimes we'll get away with, if it's with a picture, if it's an older kid that can tell us what happened. Sometimes we just rush over to see what's going on and then determine from there once I see it. Again, we get the consultation because we are not the expert on bruises. Depending on what it is, a small child that's not verbal, that's hit their face. It's more than, it's a bruise and a scrape. We would need to do that determination. Those fatalities get reviewed. We actually have, I think it's weekly meetings where, again, I'm talking about my experience in my county. I don't know if it's the same over there, but we have child protection team meetings. I think it's what they're called, something like that, where we have the children's hospital, law enforcement, child welfare, attorneys, I don't know who else, that go over those big child abuse cases, fatalities, near fatalities, and review what's happened. I participated in a couple for my own cases. For sure, law enforcement would do their investigation if we're doing it together. Like I said, I was involved in one where the child was injured but remained alive. So we coordinated our investigation. They're determining, what's going to happen as far as charges. We're determining what's going to happen as far as the child. If nothing was done about seeing that child with a bruise on the face and then the child died the next day, then I would say, maybe not that social worker directly. Maybe the social worker consulted with their supervisor and it was, determined that it was fine. no, whatever. That's not, that information is not on there. If that social worker said, "Oh yeah, I saw there was a bruise," walked away, that social worker is responsible. That goes against training. That goes against policies. And yes, social workers, you know, I think, I don't know if it's all like government workers, where we do have what's called qualified immunity. That means that we're not able to be personally, well, we're able to be sued, but we can't be held personally liable while acting within the scopes of our job. So as long as you're not being negligent, you're not responsible for what happened. So let's say this worker called her supervisor, and supervisor said, it's fine. He fell off the tricycle. We're good. We consulted. Just write it down, because sometimes we do that. Then that's it. They didn't act willfully. They didn't act negligently. They followed, you know, some steps, and that's, you know, that's fine. That you know, then if it was an unfortunate accident, then that happens. You know, in those situations, you know, that lawsuit would just be dismissed. But that's what I'm saying. If this is all the information there is, if there is no records of this worker bringing it up the chain of command, if there was no follow up, no questions about how did this occur, what can we do, what follow up are we gonna do about it, then that's when I get concerned. One thing that I know law enforcement would do, as we would do if there was a child abuse investigation, is we would have to come up with a timeline of events, you know, to the minute of where was this child, who was watching them, you know, what is the timeline where these bruises could have occurred, who was watching this child during that time. A lot of the times, people get upset that the children are removed from the home before the parents are found guilty. But the system is set up this way because it's for the protection of the child. If you are suspected of injuring somebody gravely, why would we want a child left in that situation while the paperwork is done? The legal system can take years to go through a trial. That would not necessarily be safe for the kids. So that's why you know, we do sometimes take action first and ask questions later, based on the situation, for what's best for the children. I think maybe that might have, you know, if that had been done in this case, where they said, hey, there's an injury, I don't like it, I'm gonna take him back to my county to get him checked out, and then decide if he can stay with cousin or not, that might have saved this kid's life. It could have, it could not. It could be that his injury was already, I don't even know how to say, what to say. Now, what happened with this lawsuit? So the article I read back in March, that was the first, March 2020, that was the first time I heard about this, from the Union Tribune newspaper. It said, it was talking like this county has spent like $12 million settling lawsuits. So this particular case, they settled with the mother for $500,000, with no taking no responsibility for what happened. So they're not accepting liability. They're not accepting responsibility. They're just saying, let's not take this to court, and that's it. It's over. There was no comment from child welfare. They're still claiming, you know, confidentiality. Like I said, the news said they had to file a motion with the court to get records, and they were able to review records. Like I said, I don't know if there was ever any charges filed. So yeah, hopefully you learned something from this video, for the two videos, and I didn't just leave you more depressed and confused. It's, you know, all of these situations are not clear cut, and we also have to look at, it's not, a lot of this information comes out after the fact. The day the social worker was there, all she knew was they live in this home, he has one bruise, and then a kid that runs around, jumps, rolls, and who knows what. It could be a very common injury. We do the best we can with the facts we have at the time, and a lot of these facts don't come out until after. Okay, I'll leave it there. If you have any comments or suggestions, just go ahead and leave a comment. I'll be checking them. Thank you so much.